It's a warm welcome here in our studio in Serekunda. This is Star TV News with me, Dado Cham. In the headlines tonight, Barrow calls Assembly vote on COVID-19 unfortunate, invokes constitutional powers. Minister of Health urged public to disregard May Ahmed Fatih's claim on the condition of quarantine centers. Yet provide medical items to the Gambian government. On the international scene, WHO head says he will continue leading virus fight after Trump's threat. UN convoy warns foreign bankers will worst Libyan conflict. Biden adds staff to soar up wavering support among Letterman voters. Those were the headlines, and now the news in details. His Excellency President Adama Barrow described as unfortunate the National Assembly's weekend vote against the extension of the state of public emergency in COVID-19. Mati Senghor has the rest of the details.
The President decried the failure of the National Assembly resolution to carry the votes required to extend the state of public emergency. Just 23 members of the National Assembly voted in favor of an extension, while 25 members voted against it.
This is the time that we must all come together as a nation and put the interests of the country first and high above politics. This is about all of us as a people, bound by a common destiny. It is a period to show our political maturity as a democratic society capable of putting all narrow interests aside for the national interests.
The 1997 Constitution empowered the National Assembly, provided it with the responsibility under these circumstances to support the government's effort to combat COVID-19 under Section 34(5). With regret, he added, the August Assembly failed to act on its powers.
As a result, my government and I owe it to the people of this country to protect them from this grave danger. It is my duty to act, and it amounts to a deadly abdication of responsibility if I fail to take the right action in the face of an obvious threat to the lives of our people.
In light of this, he invoked the powers conferred on him by Section 34(6) of the 1997 Constitution to further declare by proclamation, published in the Gazette, effective today, 19th May 2020. A state of public emergency continues to exist in the whole of the Gambia. Since the National Assembly is no longer in session, this state of public emergency shall last for 21 days in accordance with Section 34(2) of the Constitution. Accordingly, President Barrow also reissued the emergency regulations that were in force before the state of public emergency expired. They include the regulations declared on 26 March 2020 and extended by the National Assembly on 3 April 2020. These reissued emergency regulations shall also continue to be in force in line with the proclamation the President have made yesterday. He finally called on the general public to appreciate that this is in the best interest of the whole nation, and prayed that the Almighty God continues to bless and strengthen Gambians as a united people. Reporting for Star TV News, I am Mati Senghor.
The leader of the Gambia Moral Congress Party last week claimed in his statements that the condition of the quarantine centers in the country are poor, with the Minister of Health dismissed yesterday and urged the public to disregard the information as all quarantine facilities are in good condition.
Modujai, Director of Health, said in a press release, quarantine centers are in hotel standard bed, television, air conditioned, dining tables, refrigerators, toilets and room services, as well as health services such as psychosocial support medical care. This can be attested by 19 journalists, he said. Regarding the lack of face masks for health personnel at the center, the Minister of Health said that as part of the policy, all health personnel at quarantine treatment laboratory centers are provided with personal protective equipment such as face masks, gloves, etc. According to Maifati, based on his conversation with some of the frontline workers during his time of quarantine, he realized that some of these health personnel have to borrow money in order to give their families. The ministry also dismissed this information, saying that the health workers are also civil servants who are receiving their monthly salaries from the Gambian government on time. The ministry also clarified that putting people in quarantine or isolation is mandatory as indicated in the National Public Act of 1990 and the International Health Regulation 2005 as the best strategy to avoid further transmission of diseases. And that's what the ministry is doing by using the migrant national resources to provide standard hotels as quarantine centers at no cost, including daily meals to the person on quarantine for 14 days. Reporting for Star TV News, I am Danda Cham.
The Youth Empowerment Project, in partnership with IOM and other partners, today presented basic medical supplies to the Gambian government through the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment in response to the fight against COVID-19. Our reporter Mariam Madam covered the presentation and she now reports.
The purpose of the medical equipment presentation is to help the government, especially Ministry of Health, in fighting against the deadly virus COVID-19 and to support young Gambian entrepreneurs to create income-generating activities such as the production of personal protective equipment that are made in the Gambia. The first presentation to the Ministry of Health is 10,000 face masks, 500 suits, and 100 face shields. The donation is part of a large contribution of 45,000 masks and 2,000 suits that are being produced on the EU-funded projects, including the Youth Empowerment Project implemented by ITC and the EU-IOM Joint Initiative for Migrants Protection and Reintegration. The EU ambassador to the Gambia, Atela Lajus, during the presentation explained their intention to whom the equipment are to be given and described the initiative as a support to young Gambians to create job opportunities from the European Union.
While the donation is to the government, of course, represented by the Honorable Minister, the protective suits and shoe covers are primarily intended for frontline immigration and border officials. And I appreciate the presence of representative from the Ministry of Interior. The face masks are for frontline workers and other exposed professionals, while the face shields, in those boxes behind, are primarily for medical staff. Besides being funded by the European Union, the different types of equipment have one more thing in common. They are all made and produced in the Gambia. They are all designed and manufactured by Gambians in the Gambia. As we all know, the COVID pandemic has not just created a health crisis, it has also created socio-economic consequences, a crisis. And it is the small businesses that are hit most harshly. In the tourism sector alone, billions of dollars are lost due to the virus. It affects not just hotels and restaurants, but also small companies in the craft sector and tailors. I am very pleased that the production of the personal protective equipment provides alternative sources of income for these businesses. The equipment being handed over today hence demonstrates the European Union's socio-economic support to Gambia by creating jobs and generating income opportunities for many.
The Minister of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, Honorable Lamin Job, shows appreciation to the donors and compliment them for their endless support to the Gambia.
May I take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to the International Trade Center and the International Organization of IOM. I mean, together with the umbrella body of the EU, who facilitated, the presentation of these PPEs to the Ministry of Health today. I mean, once again, reaching out to the government of the Gambia in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The support with personal protective equipment for the frontline workers in the health sector and immigration border officials will complement the current efforts to combat COVID-19. My ministry therefore appreciates and wishes to thank the European Union for the continued support given to the Gambia in many areas, both directly through the government and indirectly through partner institutions to support government's development agenda.
He further thanked the Ministry of Health for their continued commitment and efforts demonstrated in the fight against COVID-19. He also called on all stakeholders to support the Ministry of Health in this combat. The Minister of Health, Dr. Lamin Samate, says his ministry is grateful for kind gestures from the donors in the struggle of fighting the deadly virus, as it has affected everyone.
Our ministry is very grateful for this gesture. We were not expecting it, so it came as a surprise, but we knew behind the scenes your minds have been on us. The ministry is very, very grateful for this kind gesture in our struggles against COVID-19 in the Gambia. COVID-19, we are all aware, has been a global health challenge, a global pandemic of unseen proportions in our generation. It is the challenge of our generation. None of us had seen this kind of thing before. But here we are, confronted with such, and we have to find a way of dealing with it.
He said the virus has caused an economic hardship throughout the globe, and the Gambia has been experiencing difficulties in the health sector, and the government is very concerned. He noted that besides the challenges they are facing, the Ministry of Health and the government has put forward strategies since they had the existence of the virus, by mobilizing people within the ministry to sensitize Gambians about the virus. The Youth Empowerment Project is an EU-funded flagship project of the Republic of the Gambia, implemented by the International Trade Center in collaboration with the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment, and the Ministry of Youth and Sports, with the objective to improve skills, create jobs, and generate income for Gambian youths. Reporting for Star TV News, I am Mariama Dem.
And now the news beyond our borders. U.S. President Donald Trump has called Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi sick after she criticized him because of his threat to withhold funding from the World Health Organization. Trump has accused the World Health Body of being too close to China and says he wants to see substantial improvement within the next 30 days. Ajazila Maikana reports from Washington, D.C., U.S.
President Trump arrives on Capitol Hill for a meeting with Senate Republicans, continuing to flout his administration's own guidelines by not wearing a mask in public and lashing out at the Speaker of the House, Democrat Nancy Pelosi.
These people are sick. Pelosi is a sick woman. She's got a lot of problems, a lot of mental problems. We're dealing with people that have to get their act together for the good of the country.
Pelosi has sharply criticized President Trump's threat to withhold funding from the WHO, describing it in a radio interview as stupid and dangerous. Earlier in the day, the president indicated he had no intention of backing down.
On a separate subject, you sent a letter last night to the WHO.
Yeah.
What reforms do they need to do to...
Well, it's just on the letters. I don't want to go through it. The letter is a very detailed, long letter, but basically they have to clean up their act. They have to do a better job. They have to be much more fair to other countries, including the United States, or we're not going to be involved with them anymore. We'll do it a separate way.
But critics warn that walking away from the WHO as a global search is underway for a vaccine could have serious consequences for the United States should it not be the first to discover one.
This is not the time for the U.S. president or any leader to try to weaken the capacity for multilateral collaboration and action. The WHO provides vital international assistance and coordination. There's really no other entity or organization that can do what the WHO can do.
With the world's worst death toll, over 91,000, the accusation that President Trump is attempting to distract attention from his administration's own failure is not going away. Whatever the reason for the president's insistence on blaming the WHO, one fact is indisputable. The organization declared a pandemic on the 30th of January, this at a time that President Trump was describing the virus as like a flu that would soon miraculously disappear. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
The UN's acting convoy for Libyan, Stephen Williams, has warned that an influx of foreign support for the two rival sides is threatening to intensify the fighting. The number of civilians casualties have been growing over the past month as forces loyal to renegade Commander Khalifa Haftar continue their year-long campaign to seize Tripoli from the UN-recognized government. Forces allied to the government of national account have taken 2 towns near Tunisia border from Haftar. Al Jazeera James By reports from the UN, New York, US.
After a surge in fighting in recent weeks, the UN's acting special representative Stephanie Williams gave this bleak assessment of the situation in Libya to Security Council ambassadors.
I believe we have reached another turning point in the conflict. From what we are witnessing in terms of the massive influx of weaponry, equipment, and mercenaries to the two sides, the only conclusion that we can draw is that this war will intensify, broaden, and deepen with devastating consequences for the Libyan people. As the foreign intervention increases, the Libyans themselves are getting lost in the mix. Their voices crowded out. We must not let Libya slip away.
She said it was civilians paying the price, 58 killed and 190 injured since the 1st of April, an 89% rise in civilian casualties compared with the first 3 months of the year. She said the vast majority were the result of attacks by General Haftar's forces. She said it was regrettable that at the end of April the general had rejected the international peace plan and claimed he alone had a mandate to rule the country. Libya's ambassador, who's loyal to the government of national accord, was scathing about Haftar and one of his main international backers, the United Arab Emirates.
We wish to inform this council that we have damning evidence of direct illegal transfer of these specific weapons to Libya by the United Arab Emirates in support of the war criminal and his militias, which these evidence we are sharing with the panel of experts.
In previous Security Council meetings over years, the United Nations has been reluctant to criticise one side or the other, simply saying that both must show restraint. But the tone has now changed. The criticism of General Haftar was direct and much stronger, amid reports that even some of his backers believe the impetuous commander has overplayed his hand. James Bayes, Al Jazeera, at the United Nations.
On Wednesday, President Trump is reaching out to Hispanic voters, long considered the sleeping giant of U.S. politics. He is polling well among Latin American voters, something that may be a problem for Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. Biden advisors say he needs to do more, especially in battleground states like Florida. The former vice president tasked to reducing the Latino community have been complicated by the coronavirus pandemic, and his campaign is not as well funded by President Trump's. Al Jazeera Andy Glacher reports from Miami.
It's estimated that every 30 seconds a Latino in the US turns 18 and becomes eligible to vote. In the 2020 presidential election, a record 32 million people who identify as Latino will be able to cast a ballot, making them the largest voting bloc after whites.
Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.
For both candidates, reaching out to the Latin community will be vital, although according to a recent Latino Decisions poll, President Trump may have an early edge. Just under half of registered voters are backing Joe Biden. Polling experts say Republicans are better at targeting and research, while the Democratic Party has taken support for granted.
They know how to go after specific emotional issues. Democrats, unfortunately, have not. Democrats believe that they have the Latino vote, but they do very little to keep them.
This is freedom. President Trump, thank you.
President Trump launched his Latinos for Trump campaign last year, targeting swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Florida. A big part of Trump's campaign machine is labeling Biden a socialist. That's something many in the Latin community fear, but Democratic strategists say Joe Biden has experience that counts.
How many times has Trump gone to Latin America? Once. To Argentina for G20. How many times did Joe Biden go to Latin America as VP? 16 times. So I think that actions speak louder than words.
The former vice president's task of reaching the Latin community has been complicated by the coronavirus pandemic, and his campaign's not as well funded as President Trump's. Latino strategists say Biden needs to show more urgency and a better ground game to increase enthusiasm in his presidential campaign. Joe Biden's strategy for reaching Latino voters has been called sluggish, but the former vice president may have an ace up his sleeve. He's made it no secret he's thinking about a Hispanic running mate, which may boost support. Either way, analysts say he needs to do a better job of reaching out to a voting bloc that can't be ignored. Andy Gallagher, Al Jazeera, Miami, Florida.
And before we end the news, a recap of our main headlines. Barack calls Assembly vote on COVID-19 unfortunate, involves constitutional powers. The Minister of Health urged public to disregard May Ahmed Fateh's claim on the condition of quarantine centers. Yet provide medical items to the Gambian government. On the international scene, WHO head says he will continue leading virus fight after Trump threat. UN convoy warns foreign bankers will worsen Libyan conflict. Biden asks staffs to soar up wavering support among Latino voters. That's all for this edition of the news. Please enjoy the rest of our programs and join us for tomorrow's news. Thank you for watching.